Made Man is a 2006 gabagool simulator / every mafia movie cliché imaginable / third-person shooter developed by UK-based Silverback Studios. Made Man is an intriguing entry in video game history. Judging by the less than stellar reception, you'd think Made Man would be featured in every worst video games ever released listicle. Nah, Made Man is completely forgotten. A footnote of a footnote. Information about this game is so scarce that the only crumbs of info I could find came in the form of a few uncited facts on the game's deserted Wikipedia page, and this press release announcing Silverback Studios' founding and development of the game. In fact, its Wikipedia page was where I discovered Made Man's bizarre creative pedigree. The storyline was written by the late David Fisher, a crime author best known for writing 4 Doctor Who serials back when it starred Tom Baker. I don't know anything about Doctor Who, I'm just paraphrasing Wikipedia pages at this point. Okay, right, so they hired the crime author to write a crime story. What's the big deal? Well, here's where it gets good. For Made Man's story, David Fisher collaborated with, get this, former mafioso Salvatore Bonanno, the son of Joseph Bonanno, the reputed founder and boss of the Bonanno crime family. How did Silverback Studios make this happen? How do you approach the son of the boss of the criminal organization once seen as the most brutal of the 5 families and go, yo, wanna help us make a game about dudes called Paulie and Tony and Jackie and Joey breaking balls and yelling, oh, get out of here! Granted, by the time Silverback Studios started work on Made Man, Salvatore Bonanno had already, I assume, left the family and made a name for himself as a writer and producer. But still. Interestingly, 1 year before Made Man's release, he co-wrote the novel The Good Guys with former undercover FBI agent Joseph Pistone, who you may know as the dude who infiltrated the Bonanno crime family under the alias Donnie Brasco. Yes, the 1997 Johnny Depp movie Donnie Brasco, and nearly destroyed it from the inside. Salvatore Bonanno also theorized in his 1999 memoir Bound by Honor, a Mafioso Story, that the Cosa Nostra was behind JFK's assassination. It's an interesting read if you can get your hands on it. A braggadocious style over substance look at the demise of the American Mafia from an insider's perspective, mixed with some bonkers conspiracy theories for good measure. But enough Mafia lore for now. Sadly, Made Man is not as interesting as the expanded universe lore surrounding it. It may be one of the most aggressively mediocre games I've ever played. However, I don't want to turn this video into a glorified hatchet job, and I will do my best to highlight its strengths where possible. Because this game does have a certain charm to it, and it's clear Made Man isn't just some cheap attempt at capitalizing on a trend. I wouldn't necessarily consider the 2000s the peak of Mafia-related media. Before we start, I want to thank my friend and patron Game Master for providing me with a functional copy of Made Man for this video. While we're at it, I have a Twitter where I procrastinate instead of working on videos, and a Patreon where you can support the channel with real-life money. Let's get this thing rolling.
Get your ass down there and fix it, capiche?
The player assumes the role of Joey Verola, a quick-witted New York wise guy with a penchant for monologues. The story spans 3 decades of his life, and documents Joey's rise through the ranks. From Joey's service in Vietnam, his meager beginnings as a hired thug, to one of Mafia's rising stars. Interestingly, the story is told through a series of flashbacks, as Joey drives to the Don's house to be made, recounting every kill and odd job he did for the Don in an attempt to school his nephew, himself a new member of the mob, in the ways of the Mafia. Now, the story is no worse than your typical made-for-TV Mafia flick. You got like guys called Sal and Vinny, bent cops and FBI agents on the Mafia's payroll, mob wars, shootouts in Italian restaurants, lots of swearing, bullshit about the Mafia's code of honor. It's We Have Goodfellas at home, but without the visual sleekness, self-reflectiveness, and deconstruction of Mafia myths that made that movie so good. It makes an honest attempt at the beginning to sort of ground the game in reality through a throwaway line, when Joey says that mob work is a monotonous grind, but it quickly falls flat when the game throws you into a shootout not 3 minutes into the mission. Other than this quick detour through Subversion Town, it's a hodgepodge of cliches, tropes, and story beats drawn from nearly every crime movie ever made, sanitized just enough to convey the illusion of an original story. Not that there's anything wrong with that, of course. Oh, you thought I was mocking? Look man, I like an honest mafia flick. I enjoy consuming media about Americans of Italian descent who partake in illegal activities and delude themselves that theirs is an organization bound in honor and tradition. I like seeing guys in tacky vintage clothes called Sonny Boy and Sally Jr. playing cards and breaking bowls in the back of a butcher shop located in a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood. That's the beauty of mafia media. You know what you're in for from the start. And I find mafia flicks weirdly comfy. I'm a simple man, all I need is a table full of wise guys talking shit while gorging on spaghetti and meatballs and some vintage music, and I'm fucking hooked, bro. Made Man may not check off all those insanely specific marks I mentioned, but goddamn me if it doesn't try its best. And look, despite the cliches, it's pretty clear from the way the plot is structured and told that Silverback Studios had a lot of love for the material and tried to make a serious good story. Take how they handled Joey's origin story. It's less...
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
And more Joey being forced into joining the Mafia after he saved the life of a Don's right-hand man in Vietnam. You wouldn't see this kind of thing in a story that wasn't trying to be serious. I also respect the flashback-centric structure of the story. The problem is that these time jumps made the plot almost incomprehensible. I had a super hard time following the chain of events. I had to look up a plot summary to understand how the storylines connected with each other. I don't know. Again, I acknowledge the value time jumps can add to a story, especially a decade-spanning crime saga as is the case with Made Man, but I don't think they were necessary here. All in all, Made Man works perfectly fine as a run-of-the-mill mafia flick. It's nothing special and it doesn't have to be. The story is definitely not as offensive as some reviews made it out to be.
You did good, kid.
Sadly, the presentation is where I start agreeing with the reviews. Made Man was a late PS2 era game that came out when the 7th generation of consoles was just starting to gain momentum. Not that that amounts for much now, but you know, I had to say it for perspective's sake. So you might have noticed from the footage that Made Man kinda looks like trash, especially the cutscenes. I was kinda hoping it was due to some compatibility issues that are easily fixable through a fan-made patch, but no. I looked up some footage on YouTube and this is exactly how it's supposed to look like. Those jaggies at the end of models and low-res graphics, whoo boy, that's some supreme jank even by this channel's standards. Also, nobody even bothered to make patches for Made Man. You know something's fucked when a game's PC Gaming wiki page is a stub. Fortunately, or unfortunately depending on your perspective, Made Man ran without any additional tweaks for me. So yeah, that's pretty much it in the visual department. Everything looks and moves weird. Like, what's up with these particle effects? Is this a prototype for Shepard's star chart in Mass Effect? But Made Man has some locations that, while not necessarily brimming with creativity, do add a lot to the game and fit its theme. I love this New York City mid-century penthouse and the vibe of this Italian restaurant. Of course, it wouldn't be a true Mafia story if it didn't take you through sleazy projects and rooftops. Oh, and the cemetery levels reminded me a bit of The Darkness too. Neat. Now we gotta address the big cut of gabagool in the room, namely the sound. If you can believe it, Silverback Studios actually managed to get licensed songs for the soundtrack, namely Uncle's Eye for an Eye, Backman Turner Overdrives' You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet, and Marta and Vandella's Nowhere to Run, a song which it shares with Mafia 3's soundtrack. This is not the only thing Made Man has in common with the Mafia franchise. Joey Verola is voiced by none other than Rick Pasqualone. Recognize the name? No? Okay, here are a few of his voice roles. Chicago male civilian in Watch Dogs, the local population in GTA 5, male pedestrian in Infamous, Kirby scientist army soldier civilian Minuteman pilot in Resistance Burning Skies, and Vito Scaletta in Mafia 2 and 3. Yes, they got the voice of Vito fucking Scaletta, and boy does he carry the entire game. His narration is definitely the high point of the story. His musings about the criminal world, the tidbits of Mafia lore he drops in between providing context and backstory for certain characters. He is a joy to listen to. His delivery is just right. Not too hammy and not too dramatic. I wouldn't say his talents were wasted on this game. Again, the story is serviceable, but look, When you hear the other actors, you quickly realize how lucky Silverback Studios were to hire him. The skill gap between Pasqualone and the others is all the more jarring when Joey is interacting with his nephew, whose performance amounts to "oh, faccia di cazzo" and "what the fuck did you do then, Joey?" So yeah, the supporting characters are the very definition of camp, but the good kind of camp. Too bad the sound mixing is all over the place and some lines like this gem here get drowned in the mixing. I've talked a lot about how Made Man sounds and looks, but not how it actually plays. There's a good reason why I saved this section for last, because the gameplay seems to be the area that got the least amount of care and attention. So at its core, Made Man is a third-person cover-based shooter. And that's it. No upgrade trees, no mechanical spins, no special movesets to unlock, no weapon upgrades and attachments, nothing. It's so by the books basic that were it not for its insane amount of jank, I doubt I would have had anything to say about it. What makes it so janky, you ask? Well, basically everything. Let's start with the cover system. It's absolutely useless. You press space and Joey seeks the closest source of cover. When Joey's in cover, one of his body parts, usually his head, is in the majority of cases exposed to enemy fire. Shuffling Joey a little to the side doesn't help because then he'll just end up aiming at the wall. It's a mess and I wouldn't recommend using cover in this game except in very specific cases, like when you're getting swarmed by enemies and picking them off one by one is your only option. I suspect this game was designed with running and gunning in mind first, with the cover system being an afterthought to fit in with the crowd. Remember, we're talking about the mid-2000s when cover-based shooters were hot. Thing is, Made Man completely misunderstood what made those cover-based shooters so enticing. Namely, snappy responsive controls coupled with straightforward, predictable level design, and enemy AI intelligent enough to flank, coordinate, and thus pressure the player to run from cover to cover. Made Man falls short in all of those categories. Enemies oscillate between rushing you like a swarm of gabagool-fueled zergs and just standing still waiting for their imminent death. The level design is as straightforward as they come, but the checkpoint system turns what's supposed to be a mindless shooting gallery into a fucking slog. There's one mission toward the end of the game where you have to kill 3 mob bosses in quick succession. The first one is out in the open. The second boss you have to take out before his cronies break down a door, otherwise he escapes and you fail the mission. For some reason, the designers thought it would be a great idea to put him at the end of an enemy-laden labyrinth of store shelves. By the time you clear the room and get your bearings, he escapes and you have to repeat the entire section, including the first boss. It took me about 5 tries. So after you gaba kill the 2 bosses, he runs for the fire escape. So here's what you're supposed to do. Fight your way through his army of goons, get to street level and take him out before he reaches his car. Cool. So I made my way to street level and searched the adjacent network of alleyways, thinking that's the likeliest place a self-respecting underboss of a New York City Mafia family would hide in instead of, you know, breezing through an active war zone, and then I failed the mission. Turns out, he was the crouching NPC I assumed was friendly because when I shot him, he yelled, "Ah, don't kill me!" So I had to repeat the entire section. So look, despite the broken cover mechanics and the lousy checkpoint system, there is a lot of fun to be had in Made Man. The fun factor doesn't stem from good gameplay though, rather the ungodly amount of unintentional comedy it provides. Some, let's call them accidental brushes with humor, are slow burns. In the first mission, the game teaches you that you can shoot locks. This is the only time you do this, as far as I know, and trust me when I say I went out of my way to find other shootable locks. Here's one. It's indestructible. Then there's the gunplay. I mentioned earlier that Made Man is best enjoyed as a mindless shooter with no regards for personal safety. I meant that. The gunplay is wonky and stiff at best. You can aim down sights, but this narrows the field of view so much to the point that it renders this mechanic useless in enclosed spaces. Ammo and health pickups are plentiful, so there is no reason to engage with the mechanics that are supposed to add a layer of strategy to the gameplay. Just go in guns blazing like Polly's grandma's special gravy sauce's shelf life depends on it. Nobody gives a shit, you'll be fine. As a treat, grab a crowbar and charge mobsters like the love child of Morgan Freeman and Ralph Cifaretto from The Sopranos. What else? Ever thought, gee whiz, what if the mobsters' Max Payne guns down also had bullet time? Well, about that. When this meter fills up, players can activate Kill Rush, essentially a bullet time-like effect that slows down time and allows Joey to shoot an infinite amount of bullets without reloading until the effect runs out. It's serviceable, though it would have greatly benefited from a shoot dodge kind of mechanic. On the other hand, hats fly off when enemies are shot, so I guess shoot dodging would have caused the already fickle physics engine to collapse under its own weight. And let's not forget about the execution mechanic, which fills up Joey's health bar for some reason. I have no idea whether there are any parameters triggering it, or if it happens at random or is scripted, but hey, I'll take any opportunity to hear Joey yell "No pecasque for you, fucko" before blowing some poor wise guy's brains out. Apparently I'm doing voices now. This is that kind of channel now. Fuck! Finally you can dual wield all weapons, and I mean all of them. Pistols, shotguns, Uzis, and even assault rifles. And dual wielding is so essential to survival that it may as well be the sole option. You're putting yourself at a severe disadvantage by not doing so. The moment where the game jumped the shark for me was when I realized that I could dual wield assault rifles in the Vietnam levels. Bless their heart, I know they tried their best to make a serious story, but I just couldn't take the game seriously after this point. Joey was going on and on about revenge and the horrors of war while Tony Montana's "Say hello to my little friend" was looping in my brain. It was just so bizarre. And that's about it for this video. A bit of an abrupt transition, I know, but I literally have nothing else to say about this game. Made Man is an interesting, albeit extremely flawed oddity. It had the makings of a decent third-person shooter, but the devs lacked the experience to piece them together into something serviceable. Similarly, the story had a lot of potential, but its flashback structure coupled with dubious voice acting make it a hard sell. That being said, I still recommend you give this game a shot. Just for the sake of experiencing its weirdness for yourself. It's not like there are dozens of Mafia-themed games where you can dual-wield assault rifles in Vietnam just out there waiting to be played. As always, a huge thank you to my wonderful patrons whose generosity makes these videos possible. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.